So I'm Jared Rendell. I'm from Consumer Affairs. I was just about to say Ministry of. I'm from Consumer Affairs, part of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. I'm the acting manager for the Capability and Information team, which is all a big mouthful. You guys probably know me as that guy from ScamWatch. Oh, cameraman. Sorry, we got started. But I hate scammers. I absolutely hate them. Not in a funny way, I'm not making a joke. I actually think that they're dirty little thugs. Nasty people who live in the online world for the only particular reason that they are there to take your hard-earned money. All of you. Not one person in this room will be able to go through an entire lifetime and not get to the point where they have some sort of vulnerable situation in their life that would make them more open to being done over by a scam. We've done a lot of looking into the sorts of demographics that make up victims of scams, and they come from all walks of life. And we do have a lot of messaging around getting savvy online, but we also know that there are people from, who realistically should have known better, that for whatever reason, the situation that they were in their life at that point in time made them vulnerable to being attacked. And even though they might have even seen the scam perhaps show up in their inbox numerous times and deleted it, for whatever reason, this time, they've clicked on OK and sent money away that has then gone to them personally, but also to the New Zealand economy. And then when you start to extrapolate out what those figures look like to the New Zealand economy, it's significant. When I've only been in this role for about 18 months. When I first started in this role, one of the first things that I realised very quickly was that there's a lot of players in this space, in the mass-marketed consumer fraud industry, if you like, in this country. And that's great. They're all got slightly different agendas, slightly different reasons for being there. And what Consumer Affairs has been really good at is collaboration, is getting those people together in a room and coming up with some good key messaging to talk to people. And these have turned out into fraud awareness weeks that Consumer Affairs has run for the last, I think, 10 years. One of the things that I then very quickly realised after that was that even though there's a really good collaborative effort in terms of consumer awareness, there is less going on in terms of coordinated collaborative effort. So one of the things that I really wanted to do in this role was to get some better coordination going on. At about the same time that I was thinking about these things, Carmen here from Department of Internal Affairs was planting a little seed into the mind of Lee and Chris here from NetSafe about working closer together. Didn't know what it was going to look like, but just thought that it would probably be a good idea for them to be working much more closely and more coordinated. So I took that opportunity to start what's known as the Cross-Agency Working Group, which is basically a very small working group that is Consumer Affairs, Department of Internal Affairs, Anti-Spam Compliance Unit, and NetSafe. So it's an NGO government partnership. And the thing that we all have in common is that we all take scam reports from the public. So we have access to really useful information about both what scams look like and also about the victims that are falling to scams and why they are. The other thing that we also have in common is that we all work from a comms perspective, more or less. Department of Internal Affairs have an enforcement element to what they do, obviously. Carmen is more working in that comms space. So it made sense for these three organisations to be working together, taking scam reports at one end, and then working out how to provide better comms to the public to prevent people from falling for these scams out the other end. So the group's quite new. We actually just launched it at the Scamscape conference that we ran with NetSafe. John Duffy's over there in the corner. Great conference that we run this year, and we just launched the working group at that conference. And so we've only met once or twice since then. But we're already starting to work more closely with some of these players that are in the industry, working out what they need from us and what we can do for them. And a number of initiatives have come out of that. But what we certainly want to find out more about today is getting some ideas fed into the system about better ways we can collaborate and also better ways that we can communicate. So I will pass it over to Gum to tell you a little bit about what DIA does in the space.
Hi, I'm Carmen. I'm the analyst for the Anti-Spam Compliance Unit. We regulate electronic messages that come into our space, and a lot of the messages that I see coming through are scams. And part of that, we thought, well, there needs to be a lot more awareness around the country, and apparently, according to our analytics at the end of the month from around the world, about these scams. And so we set up some pages on our website about scams that are reported to us, and we thought, well, we need to get that out into a wider space, so we set up a Twitter account, and now through the working group we have a Facebook account, and so the tweets go to the Facebook account. So we've got a bunch of followers on Twitter, and then it goes out to another 5,000 on our Facebook account, which has been open for 2, maybe 3 months, which is pretty amazing. And we want to improve this. We got together so that we could kind of build a nice little community where we could inform as many people as possible about what a scam looks like. And we believe that just because not everybody goes onto Facebook or onto Twitter or does much time on the internet, they are going to have friends and family that do, so that they can educate the other people about what's going on. And so we really want to know what you guys think of how we can bring that, the education or the awareness, and how we can move into that space, and maybe how you guys can help us with that, and to see any ideas that you guys have. And here's Lee.
Thanks. So I'm Lee from NetSafe, and I've got just a couple of slides. I know we're not supposed to. We want to get on to asking you questions about how you think we can build more resilience to scams, because unfortunately there is a lot of money that goes out of the country on scams. So we run the Orb, which is an online reporting system, and we set that up with partners who are the police, New Zealand Customs, the Department of Internal Affairs, Consumer Affairs, Commerce Commission, Office of the Privacy Commissioner, TradeMe is one of our partners. So we are working collaboratively with all those agencies, and what happens at NetSafe is we triage those scam reports that come in. So we have a look at them, people get personal replies from us, and if necessary we pass them on to whoever they should go to. But just to give you an idea, these are figures not from the Department of Internal Affairs, but from Consumer Affairs and from the Orb. So that's for 2011 over the year. That's the actual number of how many people put in reports on those different types of scams. Now, how many of you have been rung by someone who said, I'm from Microsoft, or Quantum PC, and you've got a virus in your computer, right? So you all know that you haven't got a virus. Well, you might have a virus in your computer, but Microsoft doesn't know that you have, and they're not going to cold call you, even though they ask you for you by name. So that was the biggest last year. That was the highest number of reports that we got. So obviously people report, even though they know that it's a scam, they report anyway. They haven't necessarily been scammed, but they will report. So those are like the 5 top reported scams. But what's interesting, we keep a copy, we note how much money people have lost. So they write in the report and they say, I've bought a iPhone for $150 off a Chinese website and I've lost $150. So we make a note of that. And when you look at the amount of money, it's a very different picture, actually. So out of, I think it was, just let me check, 88 reports that came to our 2 agencies, 88 reports on dating and romance scams, $914,000 went out of New Zealand on those scams. So there were only 88 that were reported, so we have no idea about how many there actually are. That's how many were reported, and that's the amount of loss. We got 2,300 about of that cold calling, the PC doctor, what we call. Hi, Martin. We got about 2,300 of those, and the amount of money that went out was 41,000, so a much lower level of money. So that just gives you an idea of the sort of thing that we're trying to, if we can, educate the public or stop the public. You know, it's a lot of money going out of the country, and there was a little bit in the Herald just a couple of days ago about investment fraudsters in Australia, where they said investment fraudsters have swindled more than New Zealand dollars, 144 million, from 2,600 Australians in the past 5 years. So that was the investment fraud, which you would have seen on that last slide was quite high up there in terms of reporting as well. So there's a whole lot of different scams. One of the things we see by taking these reports are trends, and I know that one of the things that I'm seeing is much more spear phishing, so very individual targeted scams. So things like a woman who got an email from her son who was travelling in South America. It sounded like him. All the things that he said in the email were really, really accurate. He needed $10,000 because he'd had a jet ski accident and he needed to pay medical expenses, da-da-da. She sent him $10,000, found out that someone in a backpackers, they'd shared Facebook, you know, they'd friended each other on Facebook, and someone sent that email to her. So really interesting, very, very targeted. So we see more of that. And I think, Carmen, you're seeing more.
We get a lot of the email and text message lottery winnings saying you've won this amazing prize and you've never entered it. And they've started reformatting it, saying that you didn't enter the competition, your email address or your cell phone number was put into this pool and it got drawn out, and congratulations, and just give us a yell and we'll send you the money. And one of the main questions that people ask is, how did the scammer get my information? And then the second one is, am I compromised fully now? And it's...
Yeah, we're seeing more and more come in by text, aren't we? Yeah, as well. So not necessarily by email, but on obviously with your smartphone. So what we want to know is how you think awareness and resilience can be built. Because there are definitely some vulnerable groups in our communities, but it's, as Jared said, not limited to any one demographic, people who get caught in different types of scams. So that's enough from us.
I don't watch the show, but can we get Shortland Street to run a story where somebody gets scammed by a hi, I'm from Windows company or something like that?
Don't show them how to get scammed.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Barbara. I work for Auckland Libraries. Now, I'm very aware that there are the vulnerable groups out there. One of them would be people like my mother, who will believe any story that you tell her as long as you do it with sort of big eyes. Thank goodness she's only got dial-up up north, so that's okay. I was just thinking, though, in our library systems, we have a lot of the public come in to use our computers because they don't have computers at home. And these people would tend to be, apart from their gaming skills, fairly unsophisticated users because they don't use computers much. Now, I think that probably you have got a New Zealand-wide network of libraries out there that could be used to push this message out to users. Also, I know that the National Library facilitates Aotearoa People's Network, Kaharoa, which is rolled out in a lot of the provincial public libraries in New Zealand, and this is another vehicle that possibly the DIA, being the parent body now, could actually look at perhaps working in collaboration with rolling the message out. The trick is, how do you roll the message, not how do you roll the message out, but what message do you roll out? I don't have any thoughts about that at the moment.
I'm William. I have a question, really. What do you think is the most compromised mail or email or service that scammers usually attack?
Hello. We mostly see the free email systems. There are some that are a lot more secure than others. I don't know if we're allowed to name names, but I'll just say Google, like Gmail stuff. The bonus of having a paid email account is that you've got an ISP that you can go to and say, what the hell's going on? However, you have to pay for it. And I think when you do use a free account, you need to just be really aware of what you're leaving in your email account and make sure that your password is really secure. And you can change it as many times as you like, just make sure that it's really secure. Something that we see from like the hijacked accounts where they're stuck overseas sort of things, the scammers take control of the account for 7 days and then they release it. But when you get your email account back, everything that was in it is gone. So if you are saving things in there like scan copies of your passport or your driver's license, maybe not so much for you right now, but when you're older, and just images and anything else that's gone and you don't know where it is. So I think the main message with email accounts is keep it secure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Arahi. My background is a computer programmer back in the 90s. Look, education is a wonderful thing, empowering people, especially in things like this, to do with scams, hacks. I try to get a group of guys together to design the software to try and get involved with Apple and PC to actually put in front of when you reboot your computer, you start your computer and then this little intro thing comes up and it gives you just basic keys of what happens if you're unaware of the IT world and technology. And if you have a look at in the old days with VHS and video and CDs and DVDs, they always give you a warning. See, this stuff is basic. All you need to do is get the right people together, and we have this talent in New Zealand, get them together and design something that's an all-rounder for all types of users. But the most simple thing about it is the interface. The interface has to be basic, simple, that even a child can understand. And there's ways of getting around it. I mean, you know, as a young computer guy, we used to practice, we used to try and hack one another's computers as part of, you know, growing up learning this technology. But that's the old days. But today it's about safety online. And safety also has to do with the guys that think they have all the knowledge, which actually they don't. It's only when you bring all the knowledge together that we start to understand and we see a better picture. Kia ora.
My question, my name is Mark. I work for an email security company. So the concept of protecting people in the context of their email is close to my heart, I guess. I wonder, from the sort of government and NGO perspective, whether you've had much luck with the free email service providers in terms of getting them to pay any attention to the crud that frequently emanates from their networks. And I actually, you mentioned Gmail, although you weren't going to mention names, I actually put them in that basket, because those of you who know how to read email headers know that Gmail don't include any information in those headers that can lead you back to the actual generator of the message. And so you're stuck with their abuse team, who are notoriously silent. And I couple that with Yahoo, who, of course, anyone here use Extra? So you're stuck in Yahoo's boat. So from my perspective, we've had a lot of trouble getting them to pay attention to security matters, and especially since in New Zealand quite often we're considered small fry for the global players, and I wonder how much luck you've had being able to throw perhaps some of the weight of the government behind getting them to pay attention to us. Is there some value in us having a joint one voice approach to actually getting them to pay attention to us?
Well, actually, I was just wondering, does Tony want to talk to that point? Because it's probably falls into the anti-spam space.
Yeah, I mean, listen, spam is a very, very complex problem, and it has been for many, many years. And a lot of people from industry, academia, from regulatory agencies and authorities have been looking at the problem of spam and how to solve it for a long time. I don't know how far, and this is my own personal opinion and not that of internal affairs, I don't know how high on the agenda the issue of spam is for the government and what priority or importance they put on that with respect to tackling the issue. ISPs have got a lot better in what they do. The filtering now is a lot better, and certainly having knowledge of and working with Mark as well in his environment as well. I know that filtering for email and spam is a lot better these days. Maybe we should have a filter-free day from ISPs, and maybe if we did that, not only would people be reminded about the threat and the issue of spam, but I would imagine that it would probably bring down some critical systems across New Zealand as well. So from a perspective of the question you've asked, Mark, I think the will is there in relation to working collaboratively across government and also the private industry as well. But it's a complex problem and takes, unfortunately, sometimes resources and energy. Whilst as a regulator, we're busy regulating and dealing with people who are breaching the Act. It is a part of the landscape that we're working in that we need and recognise that we have to work a little bit smarter in, both with the ISPs and with companies like yourself. So that's certainly something that I'll take from this discussion and see if we can sort of rekindle some of those relationships and work towards that.
He's got a mic.
Is having reasonably strong passwords, is that really that important these days? I mean, Google has a very aggressive brute force prevention system. If you're using a good provider, does a password, if it's not on the top 10 common passwords, is that really important? I think most of these attacks where people compromise your email account are because they stole your password out of your computer or on the wire when you use the same password somewhere else. I don't know if you have any evidence about that. It's just sort of my theory. I don't want to test it.
I can't answer that. Maybe Martin, if he has a microphone, could speak to that one, because we do get certainly all of the emails get compromised, and Facebook and other social media.
Yeah, so it would be difficult to tell consumers you don't need a strong password for this service, but you do for that one because that service has a good brute force. So it's easier to just go with one message, which is that you need strong passwords. Maybe in the future, if everybody has the same service that Google offers, then we'll be able to say, as long as it's not one of these passwords, you'll be sweet. And the other thing I wanted to say is just for clarity's sake, it's not the email services being hacked. So it's not Yahoo, it's not Gmail. Those services are not being hacked. They're remarkably secure services. It's loss of control of individual logons, and that's through password guessing or keystroke login or whatever. But it's a consumer level hack, not a corporate level hack.
Just to bring it back, we are working quite hard and quite collaboratively on trying to stop the scammers. That's very difficult. So one of the ways of stopping them is for people to not give them money, because then it becomes not attractive. So what we're really interested in, again, is how we build that resilience here with the public.
There's a microphone over there. Just in response to the filter-free day sort of thing, I work for an ISP, and that's quite a terrifying idea. But I do like the idea of getting the ISPs involved in the awareness, though. I think that's a really major thing, because if you're on the internet, you've got an ISP, so why not get the ISPs involved? I'm going to certainly look at doing something like that when I get back to work on Monday. But
Nat Dorkington, do you have a prepared list of simple messages that you would get out to the public, or is that something that would have to be developed as part of a campaign? I'm thinking about the things that we know, that the tech savvy among us know to do to stay safe online. There are a couple of things that are pretty simple and straightforward, like don't wire money to people, you dumbass, don't give them your bank details, there's some simple things like that, but sometimes the message is a bit more nuanced and harder. Have you worked out what, if you could get in front of people, what those things that you would tell them would be in that short, pithy, memorable fashion?
Yeah, no, we certainly have done a lot of work around really simple key messages, and we try and get those out whenever and wherever we can. It's the getting those messages to the people at the right time that's the difficult part. There was a point touched on earlier on about what I think of as point of transaction comms, and not transactions in the normal sense, but transactions when you're sending scammers your money. That's the point in time that you need to hit them with that message. And another element to what you were suggesting as well is somewhere around about 99% of scam victims send their money through one wire transfer service, which needn't be named. And so it's very difficult from...
I'm actually just about to name them. So you don't have to. I'm just about to.
Great. And from government, we can't come out and
Shall I raise my point now?
Sure, go on.
My point is probably what you want to do is involve the largest, wire transfer network, which is Western Union. I mean, they are, a huge, so many scams go through them, so much criminal funds goes through them. They're a multinational. They'll at least talk to you. Like my experience as a regulator and as someone who's been in government, they're quite willing to talk. In terms of actually transactional messages, with them, they're corner dairies. The level of training and involvement that goes in the network, it's wire transfer systems you can't really get in. Probably the message there about the message is that if you're sending money to a loved one, chances are most people are going to use a TT through a bank, use the banking system. I mean, the number of people, if someone a New Zealander, is not likely to email you and say, I am stuck overseas, please, I've fallen over and hurt myself in Hungary, please wire transfer this money to New Delhi. I mean, that's... Yeah.
Yep, that's a good point. And to be honest, the Facebook hacks, I think that the problem is more the identity fraud element to it. We don't actually see a lot of people really sending money overseas to... we have sent them, but it's certainly not large. Where it can become a bit more tricky is when you're selling your vehicle through some sort of auction website, and said scammer comes along and says to you, I'd like to buy this vehicle from you. Let's take this conversation offline, which is usually the next point in the process. And then suggests, I'd like to buy this car from you. I'm just going to pay you a few $1,000s more than the car's worth. If you could just wire transfer this money to my agent, then the deal's done. And a lot of people do fall for that scam, or the various generations of variations of that scam as well. And at that point, I don't think it's that useful saying to people, don't send money via Western Union, it's a scam. Because obviously it's a legitimate service, and we don't want to scare people off from sending money around the world.
Yeah, I'd reiterate that point. We've met with Western Union a few times on the Western Union form where you sign over here, I'd like to send money to my friend in Budapest. There's a passage in the middle that says if you don't know who you're sending it to, don't send the money. Officially, if you go to a Western Union outlet, the person is trained to say, if you don't know who you're sending the money to, don't send the money. As you point out, they're corner dairy, so quite often, they just say, do you want to have some bubble gum? It's 2 for $2 or whatever. And so, it's difficult for them to guarantee the service. But actually, internationally, Western Union is quite a productive member of the sort of anti-scam, anti-money laundering community. So, yes, they are the most commonly used service, both legitimately and illegitimately, but we certainly wouldn't want to be saying to people, don't use Western Union.
And we've had some scammers who have said to people, Western Union will ask you if you know us personally. If you say yes, you'll have to pay extra. If you say no, you'll have to pay extra, so just say yes. and then send the money. So, they're on top of all of those kinds of things. So given that it's so hard to stop, I'm going to come back to this, stop the scammers, what sort of messages do you think people will listen to? What sort of messages will young people listen to?
I think that it's actually some of the email companies that need to get a bit more clued up, because I know somebody who got a message that was, we need to change something, and he phoned up the email company to ask whether this was real. And they said yes, it was, so he gave the information required, and these people got into his email account, changed it all, and sent one of those scam messages from him. So I think that actually sometimes getting the email companies to know a bit more about what's going on inside their business is maybe something that would be quite useful. No, it's not one of my friends. It was an adult. And no, they didn't.
I just want to go back to one of the beginning things that was said. You said that people who fall victims of scams come from every walk of life. Within that analysis that you've done, are you able to tell why one person will fall for a scam and another person won't? If there is situational vulnerability, is that what we're suggesting? What are those situations? When are people more vulnerable?
It's a good question, and that is exactly the sort of analysis that we're doing, and especially in terms of that point of transaction comms. I think that's where that can be really useful. Often it tends to be a financial vulnerability. So for whatever reason, it's not a particularly good point in their lives in terms of finance. You've got to be careful then to associate that with greed. Other things, it can just be many sorts of vulnerabilities, issues with the family, crises at work, loss of employment. There's a number of touch points in people's lives where that vulnerability allows them to. But it's certainly a large portion of the online stuff really is people just not really understanding the way the thing works.
So, I work with Barbara over here in libraries, but what you're saying kind of suggests there's actually a heck of a lot of agencies that you need to be reaching out to, because there are a heck of a lot of agencies that touch on each of those vulnerabilities that you've mentioned.
If you look at the one that lost the most money, the dating and romance scams, it's pretty obvious why people are vulnerable at that point, and are really wanting to believe that this person is for real and loves them and says all those things, and they can seem very plausible, very smart, and to make it very plausible. Also, there's that that direct targeting, like we have people who target, for instance, Christian websites with the story of we need money for the orphanage in Kenya or whatever, and because it's more likely that those people will want to help. So it's quite complex and quite
Seems like an arms race.
I was wondering if I could make a comment. One of the issues that hasn't been addressed is that ISPs have a varying charging rate. And I'm with Atrix, and they give a very good social web update to their customers every month on the scams that are being run. And I think that that's something that should be looked at for all major ISPs that have reasonable accreditation. The problem that you're faced with is that adolescents go for cheap and cheerful. So they're the high-risk area. But for adults, I think they should have a little bit more common sense in their approach to saying, well, we've got this deal with a certain company that's on TV a lot and that gives the best deal around. But what isn't stated is, what's the filtering like? And so as a result, you're trading off the cheapness against the security of the network for the customer. And so the customer gets it by other means. And I think that is an area that really needs to be looked at, that a code of ethics for all those ISPs that are here, registered in New Zealand, that charge the customers for their service, that something should be implemented to say that you need to meet this minimum criteria to reduce the loss of foreign currency overseas because of the scams. Now, if Atrix can implement it, and we know Extra does, then why can't the rest of them do it on a similar vein? And I think if you go down that track, you'll reduce the number of collisions or misadventures, because the filtering will pick a lot of it up before it gets there. I would also stress that commercial identities also run firewalls. So we don't see that information coming to us the same way as Joe Bloggs does. But I think the important thing is to get the ISPs on board and force them. You can do it within internal affairs and say, listen, your code of ethics is not good enough. We want you to pull yourself in a bit here and straighten up the ship a bit and go down this track. And I think that is something you need to look at. And I think you'll get a better outcome in the short term because you'll bring everybody on board to a minimum standard. At the moment, there is no standard. It's wide open. And I think from that angle, that's where the effort should be going.
Minor internet celebrity Cory Doctorow related a story where he fell for one of these email scams. He was, I think, in the queue at a coffee shop before his morning coffee, and he was on his phone, so his screen was very small, and he clicked on one of these URLs that went to Twitter but didn't, and he put in his Twitter password, and then he went, oh my God. I don't know, is there anything we can do for that? He spent the next few hours changing all his passwords because they were all the same password. So that is practical advice. But for the moment of inattention, crossed with the deluge of spam and the small chance it gets through the filter, is there anything we can do?
Yeah. Look, mine's a two-part question. So I hear that you guys are the watchdogs, in a nice term.
Well, we take reports.
Okay. My second question is, and I like what the gentleman over here said, responsibilities with IPs. But then again, you know, this stuff actually begins at home. If they can put computers in homes, and the new generation we have today, all these kids are into cell phones, you know, computers. It is easy to implement something like this, but a particular template that goes right across the board. I'm only talking about New Zealand, not talking about any other country, but if that's the case, if everybody starts off on the same platform and having these certain criteria to keep an eye out on what scammers do or whatever, the problem is, you know, it makes the job far easier. And then, of course, stage two, going to the IP guys and making them accountable for their process. And you know, I'm a strong believer in education, and education is wonderful if the right template's laid down. Kia ora.
So it's not easy to put computers in homes, and far harder to put Clue in homes. So don't assume that that's an easy step. The question I had for you was, is who would fund a campaign to spread an educational message about that? Will anyone fund that campaign? Who are the stakeholders in this space that will work together to either work with Shortland Street or run an advertising campaign? There are plenty of non-profits and safety messages from Drink Driving Up that have reached out in the popular media to share their message, but it takes money. So who will work together to do that?
That's a great question.
I was hoping for answers.
If you have some answers, I'd certainly like to know what they are. I mean, there is some money being put into this. We have some money to run Fraud Awareness Week each year, but obviously scams happen more than just 1 week during the year. I think in terms of where we've come to it from, that collaborative effort is the right way of going ahead. And I mean, if someone from TVNZ was really interested in pushing that messaging, then I'm certainly open to talking to them. But it's a good question.
I'm not sure. It's in ISP's best interest to do filtering because it does protect their network as well as their customers. So I don't think needing to regulate them to meet a minimum standard for email filtering is going to work. Web filtering is a lot harder because it can be a lot more intrusive and there's a lot of false positives. It's a very tricky business. But ISPs definitely need to be involved in that. But it's not going to stop the dating scams and the Trade Me scams and those sort of things. I think the real big thing is around awareness as well as filtering where it works.
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing more of is online shopping from dodgy websites. And, it's really easy. People spend money and they don't necessarily send it by wire transfer. They send it, if it's credit card, well, that's okay. They can ask for a chargeback from their bank. But if they're putting it into an account overseas and they just never receive the goods. So, there has been talk about having New Zealand websites authenticated, like a Heart Foundation tick. I don't know what people's reaction to that sort of thing might be. I'll put that out there because there's all sorts of different kinds of scams which won't be stopped by filtering at ISP level.
Just in terms of costs, I think if you can break it down into probably not types of scams but method used, that may help. So credit card scams-based frauds, the banks self-fund and cover costs, which mean we all cover the cost of credit card fraud. It's just a part of doing business as being a bank that has MasterCard or Visa, because it's such a tiny percentage of how much goes through that system, but it's still millions and millions of dollars of cost to the banks. So you might be able to, if you can convince them, that's one place trying to get a small slice of how much they already spend, underwriting this. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it's sexy enough for the banks. They're like Kiwis.
I just want to say that there's been a couple of suggestions that the ISPs and the players in the middle need to take some responsibility for the crap. I agree with the thought that education is key. That when I first got internet access in the mid-late 90s as a teenager, thinking, wow, this is awesome, my computer's talking to other computers and it's all instantaneous and free. And then my computer was subsequently hacked about 2 weeks later because I didn't know the first thing about how to secure it. It gave me a bit of a wake-up call. And so a lot of my interest in the internet prior to my current role, I guess, working for an email security company is working as a network engineer, dealing with comms and also for a long time dealing with end-user support at ISPs, doing the old help desk job. Now, what I saw in that role was a lot of people who kind of barely scratch the surface of what the internet is. We talk about putting computers into the homes of people who are less fortunate and less able to get access to this sort of thing themselves, but how much time do we actually spend on the educational side of the fact that the internet really is the wild, wild west, and you are getting onto the piece of wire that every man in his criminal empire is on, and the layer of protection you have is it's up here. It's in recognising the signs of a scam and knowing when to follow the instructions you've been given and when to think that really they shouldn't have been given to me in the first place. I think education is the big thing, and I think asking the service providers to get involved and protect you is kind of passing the buck. You need to take some responsibility for your own security. And for those people who aren't aware of the need to take responsibility for their own security, we should be putting all that information in front of them and making it accessible to them. And I finally, after many years, managed to convince my grandfather to stop forwarding around all those email hoaxes, only by volunteering to be his proxy. So every single one of those he received, he forwarded to me and said, "Is this a hoax?" And without exception, I said, "Yes." And eventually, after many years, he got the message. And I'm sure many of us in the room who are probably the candidate IT literate people and their families have exactly the same problem. No, thank you. I have enough of the problem in my own family. The point, though, is, of course, education, and I think we need to really hit that home. And from the central perspective, if we can do more about educating, and it's not even it's sometimes at the school level, and it's sometimes with the young people, but it's also about the groups of older people who are relatively slow to get into technology, who are being dragged kicking and screaming into Facebook by their nieces and nephews because they really want to talk to them there. Those are the people we need to try and get that message across to. I don't know how we do it. Maybe the ISPs have a part to play because they're the people providing the access, but ultimately it's a personal responsibility, and all we can do is provide them with the information.
Excellent. Well commented, young man. Anyway, look, my wife and I, we run a ICT hub at a place called Ratnapa, and of course a lot of you people would have heard of Ratnapa. It's a church and it's also a political movement. And our hub there, we have designed that I give 15 hours of my life to this hub for free. And I educate all these young people from the ages of 3 to 12 to 15. Then I have a group of old people from 60 to about the 80s. And I teach them all this stuff, this basic stuff that we should know about scamming, about hacking, about stuff that affects us online. So if a person like me can give 15 hours of my life from Monday to Friday, surely we all can put our hands in our pocket and pull out. Because it is, like the gentleman said, it's all about learning a new mode. Education has a key, but it's not the education, it's how you deliver it. It's the secret. Kia ora.
My name's Kerry Pihema. My business is Rokeys Investigations. I'm a private investigator, and we work specifically in the romance scams and relationship investigations. We're actually really quite busy, and the saddest thing about that is that I think what came out today was the inability for a particular group to recognise what a scam is. We put out a survey last year, and it was very clear that the people that had the most difficulty with identifying a romance scam were over the age of 35, primarily females, but we're starting to see more males involved who've been scammed, and they are being scammed of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Last year alone we investigated just under $450,000, and we expect that to probably triple this year. And it not only affects the person who is dating, but affects the families. We were involved with uncovering a woman who rang up and said that she met a particular person, thought he was a Kiwi, and then when she went to the cafe, 2 Asian gentlemen turned up, and it was on this particular case, and it was an immigration scam. So it has far-reaching consequences. It's not just an online date. What became interesting in this survey was that they were just genuinely unaware of what the MO of a relationship scam is. And as a result of that, most of them had met people previously in their lives, but those people had been screened by their family members. Maybe it was a religious group or a sports group, but of course you can't do that as easily now online as you could before. And as a result of that, we're starting to see, life savings being sent overseas and New Zealand, by the way. We go out and we talk about relationship scams, and there's some really innovative software out there that people are unaware of, and just little things like TinEye. And so if you meet this person online and they've given you a photograph, just to put that into TinEye can tell you where that photograph has appeared throughout the world. And for many cases, just little snippets of information that can really add value to someone making a decision. The other thing too was the MO of a relationship scammer. We've been doing this for a number of years now, so for us we can see the red flags. But for many people they can't. They cannot identify a red flag at all, and as a result of that, they're starting to pass hundreds of thousands of dollars overseas. So I think this is a space that we need to be putting resources into, and it's a space we can see clearly with the orb. They identified that this type of fraud is increasing, and I think it's a place where we need to be putting some serious consideration.
Thanks for that. Thank you all for your contributions. There's been some really great ideas generated today, and it's great to see that it's not just us struggling with these ideas. That this is actually really difficult work, but it's good and important work, and we're definitely going to continue doing it. And certainly, if we can start collaborating more with the likes of ISPs and banks and major industry players, then we certainly will to try and get some of these messages out there. Thank you.